In today's lesson from the Gospel of Matthew, we find Jesus calling Matthew to follow him. Matthew is known also as Levi in the Gospels. We know that he is one of Jesus' 12 disciples. But Matthew is also, at the beginning of his story, a tax collector, a person who is tasked with collecting taxes for the Roman government, a government that many in Judea and Galilee find very oppressive. Matthew is Jewish, but he is working for this foreign government, this foreign oppressor. Beyond that, tax collectors have this reputation for requiring more money than the actual tax amount. Many ask for taxes plus a little extra that they would keep for themselves. So Matthew works for a foreign oppressive government, and he works in a profession that's notoriously corrupt and self-seeking. He does not appear to be a good man. We ought not to look at Matthew and think that he has some kind of heart of gold that somehow magically makes him follow Jesus because of how good he is, that he's somehow devoid of being what all those rest of the bad tax collectors were. He's a tax collector. That's who he is. He's identified in this group of people who are called tax collectors and sinners. He is not righteous by any understanding of that word. Throughout history, every society has some understanding of who's considered righteous and unrighteous. They might not use those words, but there's some sort of understanding of who is living rightly and who is not, who is generally good and who is generally bad. We might frame it as who is living a good life and who is not living a good life. So as we start out this sermon, I want you to think about this question. What does it look like for you, for someone to live a good life? I want you to sit with that question and just let it be for a moment. For you, what does it look like for someone to live a good life? We're in church right now, and there's a very churchy answer to that question. And you might be so pure-hearted that the churchy answer is the answer that you would naturally give. That's wonderful if that's who you are. But I want you to sit with that question. I want you to allow me to press you a little bit. The line that we draw between who is living rightly and who is not living rightly has a lot to do with the type of life that we personally long for. Think of it as like the goal of your life, what matters in your life. Maybe your goal is to have a family where your children grow up to be considered successful in life. I think of this as being the goal of many people, many parents especially. They want their kids to go on, or their grandkids, or someone in their family to go on and be a success, have a good, successful life. In order to get to that goal, you will make decisions that try to get you to that goal. In your mind, there will be right decisions and there will be wrong decisions. There will be decisions about how to best use money and time, what school your kids will go to, what experiences they will have, what sort of discipline you will use as a parent, and so on and so forth. And each of those decisions will carry a weight because they touch on that goal of a good life. And you will often feel like there is a right or wrong decision on those things. You'll also be influenced by the people around you who hold similar goals. So if you want your kids to grow up and be successful, and you're surrounded by other people who want their kids to grow up and be successful, there will be a sort of standard set of ways that a kid grows up and becomes successful. And soon enough, you begin to have a standard of righteousness, of kind of what the right way is about how a kid grows up and becomes successful, especially in your peer group. You have a defined goal and a defined set of ways to get to that goal. And if you follow the script and you get what you want, you are righteous. You did what you were supposed to do. And if you don't follow the script, or you follow the script but you don't get what you want, then you fall into this other category of those who are unrighteous. Now, I'm applying righteousness and unrighteousness. It's very religious language, but I'm trying to get us into a space of like, what does this look like in just kind of general life? Now, I want you to continue to sit with that question. For you, what does it look like for someone to live a good life? Because the answer to that question might not be what I just described. It might not be like you want your kids to grow up and be successful. Maybe you're kind of beyond that stage of life. Maybe you don't have kids. There are all sorts of different ways that we can think about this. There are all sorts of goals that we hold and all sorts of theories about how we get to those goals in our lives. Maybe your goal is for society to be more just. Maybe it's for you to feel financially secure and not experience worry about finances. Maybe it's for your kids to feel loved. Maybe it's for you to feel peace within yourself, your conscience to be clear when you go to bed at night. We all have these things that we long for and ways that we think we can solve that longing. And we most often judge the people who are close to us but don't hold the same longing or way of solving that longing with us. Or maybe they haven't hit the same goal that we think we've hit. We all have some barometer for righteous and unrighteous. So during the time of Jesus' earthly ministry, in the geographic location where Jesus was, Judea and Galilee, the Pharisees were the people who were considered righteous. Remember that they are living within a Jewish culture that traces its lineage through institutions. And there are 3 key institutions in the time of Jesus. There is King David and the monarchy that runs through his kingly line. There's the temple in Jerusalem, and there's the law of Moses. Monarchy, temple, law. These 3 institutions frame Jewish life and what is considered a good Jewish life. Now, at this time, there is no true king. So when Jesus shows up, there's no actual messianic king that is in power. The last Davidic king was overthrown when Babylon destroyed Jerusalem in 586 BC. But the people, they're longing for another Davidic king who will be called the Messiah. So the first institution of the monarchy, it doesn't exist. It kind of exists when Jesus shows up and is the Messiah. It does exist. But functionally, it doesn't exist. And there's a longing, but there's a longing for it that it will exist. There's a longing that there will be a king. The second institution, the temple in Jerusalem, the temple does exist. There are bricks, there are big stones, there's a place where sacrifices happen. In this place, the temple is where people maintain their relationship with God through making sacrifices. If you are a righteous person, if you're a good person, if you're a person who is in right standing before God, you maintain the sacrificial system that places you in right standing with God. And so that's the whole system, is making right sacrifices, making sure that things are good between you and God. But making a right sacrifice is not simply about having the right animal or sacrificing it at the right way at the right time. You also have to show up to the sacrifice in the right way. And that's where you get to the third institution of the law. The Jewish law establishes what it looks like to show up to that sacrifice in the right way, to be clean or unclean, as the law states. The law shows people what you need to do in order to show up and make a sacrifice in a ritually pure way. Sacrifice is part of the law, but the law also describes what a righteous life looks like. It extends out beyond just sacrifice. There are ceremonial parts of the law, parts that talk about sacrifice, but there are also moral and ethical parts of the law. And taken together, the law shows what it looks like to have a right relationship with the God of Israel. It gives a goal for a good life and ways through which a good life might be achieved, if somehow you can do that. Now, the Pharisees, they're a group of people that want to follow that law as strictly as they can, as strictly as possible. They think that if they do what the law says, then they will be in right relationship with God. So they look at all the laws, and with the goal of being right with God fixed in their mind, that seemingly good goal fixed in their mind, they set out to follow the law in an exact way. And that means following the letter of the law. It becomes their whole life. They're following the script and are highly suspect of anyone who comes around that questions that script. Because the Pharisees, they are the righteous ones. They are the ones trying to live in right relationship with God. They are the good people. And they are out in front of people saying that, basically. We are the good people. Follow the way that we follow, and you'll be right. And in their pursuit of righteousness through performing the law, there are certain things that don't fit with that pursuit. And one of the number one things that does not fit with that pursuit is unrighteous people. The Pharisees are at odds with unrighteous people because they don't have the same goals in life, and unrighteous people might be able to corrupt people who are striving for the righteousness that Pharisees are after. Those unrighteous people, they're sinners, and they might make righteous people sinners too. So the Pharisees, they don't hang out with those people. They don't hang out with sinners. Sinners are the antithesis to everything that the Pharisees are about. Pharisees are striving to be in right relationship with God and doing everything that the law requires. Sinners are directly opposed to that, so you don't associate with those people. And then Jesus shows up. Jesus shows up in our gospel lesson from Matthew, and he calls Matthew the tax collector to follow him. He calls this Roman-supporting, potentially corrupt man to follow him and become a disciple. And perhaps as strange as Jesus calling Matthew to be a disciple, Matthew gets up from his tax booth and follows Jesus. And then we find Jesus eating with Matthew and a bunch of other people who are identified as tax collectors and sinners. Definitely not righteous people. Jesus is breaking a fair amount of social etiquette by doing this. A holy man does not eat with sinners. A righteous man does not eat with the unrighteous. And this grabs the attention of the Pharisees. And the Pharisees, they ask Jesus' disciples. It's an interesting detail that they don't ask Jesus this directly themselves. We don't know if the Pharisees are at this same gathering. We assume they wouldn't be because they're, not going to associate with sinners. But the Pharisees, they ask Jesus' disciples, why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners? This somehow gets to Jesus, and when Jesus hears this, he says three things. Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy and not sacrifice. For I came not to call the righteous, but sinners. The center of Jesus' words is that quote. That quote, I desire mercy and not sacrifice. It's a quote from our first lesson from Hosea. Hosea 6:6 says, for I desire steadfast love and not sacrifice, the knowledge of God rather than burnt offerings. Jesus calls it mercy. Hosea calls it steadfast love. Some translations say compassion. The original Hebrew word here that's found in Hosea is hesed, the steadfast love that God has for the covenant people of Israel. The point of this quote is that God longs for people to love in the same way that he loves. Sacrifices, while important, they are secondary. Steadfast love, mercy, compassion, that is what is primary. That is the fire that powers everything else. What God longs for is for people to experience his love, experience his steadfast covenant love, his mercy, his compassion, and then be led into a life of love. Not performing all the right sacrifices, not loving because they think that's what you ought to do, but loving because it flows out of a love that they have experienced within God himself. Not trying to keep all the laws, not trying to be righteous, experiencing love, and then loving in response. God longs for people to love him and love one another. And that's what we see Jesus doing in this scene. Jesus goes and eats with tax collectors and sinners. He loves them through eating with them, being with them. Love is what compels him to do this. And Jesus tells the Pharisees that he is doing it because the sick need a doctor and that he came to call sinners. He did not come to heal people who think that they are well or call people who think that they are righteous. Now, the Pharisees, they are sick. They are the people who Jesus came for, and yet they can't seem to grasp they are sick. And they are the ones who are, in fact, unrighteous. They seem righteous because they're doing a bunch of stuff that righteous people do, but they aren't doing the central thing that righteous people do, the central thing that Jesus is doing, which is experiencing the steadfast love of God and loving in response. Their goal is being righteous in the way that they think righteousness happens. But their righteousness actually cuts them off from actually becoming righteous because it cuts them off from being able to receive love and then extend love, extend mercy. They might have a lot of willpower, they might have a lot of outward holiness, but they don't have love. Oddly enough, the people who have the capacity to become righteous are the tax collectors and sinners, because they don't have preconceived notions about righteousness. They can receive the teaching and the way of life that Jesus will give. They can receive mercy because they really need mercy. They long for mercy, and they find it in the person of Jesus. So we return to the question from the beginning of the sermon. For you, what does it look like for someone to live a good life? The gospel tells us that the good life is not found in success or money or high-achieving children or in a life that is free from hardship. We will have those longings, and many of those longings are fine if they are secondary. And as I kind of go through the end of this, I want to say those longings are built into us. They're often desires for good things. And Jesus doesn't judge you for having those things, for wanting those things. I have those longings. But the good life is ultimately found not in those secondary matters, not in those things that we think because they're in front of us, in front of our eyes, because we can see them and experience them in the here and now. Those things are not ultimately how we judge righteousness. The good life is found in first experiencing the steadfast love of God, experiencing his mercy, that mercy coming from outside of us and us receiving it. Some traditions would call it imputation, of it being applied to us before it's ever true of us. Before we're ever considered loving people, the love of God is just applied to us in this blanket way. That reception of that love is what makes us righteous. And then we become righteous. We are transformed through that love flowing out of us and extending that love to other people, extending that mercy to others. The goal, the righteousness, if you will, is union with God that then leads us to union with other people. Union with the God who loves us, the God who has sent Jesus to die for us, to rise again for us, the God who sends his Holy Spirit to unite us to him, and then union with the people in our lives who we're called to love. That is what righteousness looks like. Not achieving something, not chasing something, but receiving the love that shows up to us like Jesus at a dinner table. Jesus breaking bread, drinking wine, being with us. That Jesus is here with us right now, and he will meet us at this table. And today, he once again extends his mercy and his steadfast love to us. Us who are sinners, are the unrighteous, but people who are made righteous through the righteousness